Welcome back, guys. This is the third part of our video tutorial series that we are writing on using AngularJS 4.2 version. Um, so in our last video tutorial, what we had, we were working on server-side feature of the application. So basically, we had our model defined. Our server-side model defined, which are like company address, company type, developer job, industry. These are our model defined, and based on that, we use Entity Framework to generate the database for us. Okay, so we have our databases, and other thing, we have all our lookup table here are populated. I wrote some script which I'm not, so I randomly added some data. For example, I have a bunch of industry here, like accounting industry or whatever, like industry type, and we have I have some job type added into table, like whether it's a full-time or part-time or contract job or whatever, and then also this company type. Whether it's a private company or public or educational company like university or military or government or whatever it is, right? So we have this basic lookup table filled in, and then these are our main table where the applicant's job, I mean the developer job would be stored. Okay, so once that is done, next thing we can do, let's go ahead and add some controller here. Even before that, so here is our DB context, developer job context object here, and our DB set defined as developer job, company type, industry, and job type. So this is not tutorial about server side, but like when I do, it's like about web API, but because whenever I do videos, I would like to go through cover everything so that you will have a whole idea. So let's okay, that is that. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm gonna add, so like I said, let's go ahead and add some controller here. Let me kill this. Its application is running right now, so let me go ahead and close that, and then let's go ahead and add a controller. We're gonna use API controller with action since we are using Entity Framework. This is the option we're gonna choose, and I'm gonna say it as a developer job. And it automatically figured out the DB context, and then name of the controller, developer jobs. Oh, the best spelling. Okay, this is a controller. Why it doesn't allow me to add that controller? Let me see. Let's choose our model class as developer job. Okay, developer jobs controller. It will take a while. It will generate some basic CRUD kind of basic class for us, and then we should be ready to go. Okay, so it created a basic web API for us. One of the cool thing I want to talk about here is like basically this is really cool. By default, it uses constructor dependency injection here. So in the constructor of this controller, it basically exposes a dependency. In this case, dependency is developer job context. So it's automatically, that dependency is automatically wired up into for our controller. If you well, before this version, well, the earlier version of the ASP.NET, you know, with the web form or MVC, whatever, if you have to have a dependency injection, you have to use different kind of controller. Well, I mean, a different kind of IOC container like Ninja or Unity or whatever, right? Now the system automatically, the now built-in feature, basically the framework automatically provides that feature. That is really, really awesome part that I like about ASP. MVC Core 2.0. This is really, really awesome feature. Okay, that is that here. Now just like that, I'm going to go ahead and add all the. I'm going to create a 4 different controller. So let's go ahead and. Okay, so what we have done so far is basically we added a bunch of controller. We have 4 controller here. We have company types controller. We have, you know, the industry controller and job type controller. So now we have controller. Now we have our model, all those defined. So now at this point, we let's go ahead and build this, because we wrote a bunch of code. Well, we didn't write a bunch of code. Basically, we asked you know, the framework to write code for us so far. Let's go ahead and make sure everything is at least building okay, and after that we can start testing our API. And if it did work, meaning it start fetching the data correctly, then we are shift our focus into the client side. We'll be strictly working on client side, because all the server side basically doing is just providing the data, basic CRUD operation, like that gets the data, gets a data by ID, you know, being able to post or put or delete, those kind of thing. Okay, rebuild all succeeded. Okay, that is pretty cool. Let's just go ahead and build. Of course, we don't have anything built. That is just by default. We just have a default template right now. These are the by default provided by the template that we have chosen. Okay, that is that. Okay. So let's talk about that. When we use that template from Visual Studio, the system automatically creates this folder called Client tab. That's where we'll be writing all our AngularJS code or client-side code. So very first thing, like, you know, like when you decide which kind of framework, your JavaScript framework like Angular or React or any framework that you decide based on your application, let's say. Primarily, this kind of frameworks is ideal for a single-page application or the client-side application, meaning we don't have a huge amount of postback, unlike really complicated web application. We have kind of like a desktop application, sort of. All right, so this is the basic structure. The application has folder called components. The component is the main. Component is basically a feature in AngularJS that has basically contain a class, and with that class is also associated with the template. We'll talk about template and everything later. So this is the basic structure here. Like for example, here component has app component, has a counter component, face data, home, navigation. And then by default it provides some files like here app_.module.shared. So let's look into that, because it will tell you a lot of things, how everything really works. Okay, so just by looking at this code right here, it kind of looks funky, but this is our class, our module. This is our main module, app module shared. And I'm going to briefly talk about how this everything basically works. These are the new, if you will be working, if you have experience with the ECMAScript 6, JavaScript by default, in the future, that's how we will be. Even before this, I would like to, well, actually we wanted to test to make sure it's fetching our data correctly. We have let's make sure it is returning data before moving into the client side. Let's go ahead and test this. Our REST services that they are returning data correctly. So that should be the endpoint for the industries, and if everything is good, it should return some data for us. Oh, okay, because my application was not even running. Let's make sure. I don't know why it is taking longer. Sometimes this is too. Okay. This is what I wanted to show you. As you can see, basically this is telling us that our web service, not the web service, the web API is working correctly. It's returning JSON data for us. So we have 56 items into our backend database, and it's returning all the data that we need. And also we can our job types. Okay, we have full-time, part-time, and contract. Everything that we have in the backend database is coming out correctly. And one more thing, one more table: job type, industry, the company types. Okay. Okay, so we have private company, public, with education. Okay, so all our lookup table that we had data is able to get our data correctly. So I decided to do it this way first because later on the idea is like we're gonna have our drop-down menu binding by fetching this data. Okay, so that is good. Now let's go back into talking about server side. Okay, I mean the client side. So this is, of course, if you are new to a TypeScript, this is how the TypeScript code looks like. It's pretty simple, very straightforward. So this is a class. Behind the scene, once it's compiled or transpiled into JavaScript, it'll be converted into object. Complicated kind of object that we don't really have to worry about. The tool automatically does it for us. So here is this meaning of the export means any other class would be able to import this one. So that's why we need export. But this is our main class. Ideally, we don't really have to export anywhere, but it's a path. So there is this whole thing right here. This is called decorator pattern right here. Basically, what we're doing is we are decorating our app class. By decorating, we exposing additional functionalities into this app module shared class. So as you can see, this ng module, of course, come from the main core, the AngularJS library. So one of the modules that is inside the core. And then this object, this ng module, contains a couple of properties which are very, very important right here. There is a declaration. Is imports, and there are others, like there's something called providers. In this case, the providers is not listed, but if you need to expose, this is very, very important. I'll show you a little example, because while if you're a beginning developers, I'm just trying to learn into Angular 4, Angular 2.0. Let's say you have some services you would like to expose throughout your application. So let's say if you have services and that services is very reusable, and you have a need to expose that service into different components, then basically you can define it here. However, if that is only used in one particular place, then you don't have to specify the providers here. So understanding this is very, very important, where your service actually really goes into. Okay, for example, here. Just to demonstrate here, actually, yeah. Let's see. I have little service here. This service has a greeter as a, what is it complain? Okay. So I have very simple interface here called iGreeter. The greeter exposes a method called greet. It takes a name as a input parameter, and this method returns string. And I have a class. This class implements this interface, and then basically constructor doesn't do anything, and we are basically implementing this method exposed by the interface here. Very simple. So now, of course, the system has to know how to provide that dependency injection, how to know that service really exists. So this is where, if we have to, this is where we basically expose that service. So as you know, very first thing, before we can use our services here, we need to import it. So that's why, as you can look at the signature, they are exported. It's kind of like a public in other programming languages, right? So we can, here's export, so we should be able to import this one. So we can say import something from, we specify the file. So this guy right here, we are inside this is our services, right? So here is the services. If you go into and we have this file called inside the service, we have this greeter class. So we are importing that here. It knows, oh, okay, you're trying to import a greeter. So we need to import both of those, like interface and in the class that it is implementing. So iGreeter and greeter. Okay. So once we imported these two modules here, now we should, very first thing we have to do, into the declaration. So idea about this declaration property is like in AngularJS, you might have component, basically the component, directives, and the pipes. Those are like construct of the AngularJS that we'll talk about later. All those things you're going to specify it here. But into the providers, we just, all the services that we're going to basically goes into the providers. All the service that you have, we're going to say we're going to export a greeter here. Actually, we don't really need the interface here. I'm just gonna but just that here it's fine. Okay, so let's say we have exposed it here. Let's say we would like to use this this service from our since we don't have created any component related to jobs yet, but we can use the existing component. Let's say in our home components, we would like to use that. So just like before, to be able to use that feature, we need to import it, right? So let me grab this piece of code. The hierarchy might be different here because I am inside the home directory, and if I get out from there, that's why I see, so I couldn't find that out. If I do this, now I'm into my services. So if I go one more, that's where my services is, okay? So that's where my greeter reside. Okay. So this is our class. In here, we'd like to use this. So let's just define public greeter as iGreeter. Let's make this guy as a private, and then basically we can do a constructor injection here. He's a private field greeter, and this so basically we have another private field called string message here. The updated type is string. Okay, and let's write some constructor here, and it's a greeter of type iGreeter. So what happens at runtime? So basically, it now knows what the greeter is because we have exposed that inside our main object, main class. So all we have to do now is a greeter. We're going to set that to a greeter, and then we can set that message. So basically, this greeter has a method called greet. It takes a parameter, let's say John or something like that. Okay, once we have this let's make this public. We need to expose it there. So once we have this message defined, now we can go into a template here. Let's just, for example, okay, I already have that for some reason message. Okay, if I save this one and run everything, you will see if there is a chances that I might, okay, so something is not right. You cannot resolve all parameters for home components. Okay, why it was not able to resolve? Let's see the home component here. Import greeter. Here is the iGreeter. Okay, it was not able to resolve. Let's look it into shared module. Why? Okay. Here is there is this extra comma. Provider. This comma is not needed. Maybe that's typo.